Konnichiwa, Mina! And now it's time for Week 15 of the 2016 PFA season, the week of November 20th to 21st. But before we begin, let's take a look at the standings. So here's the standings after 15 weeks. In the National East, Washington leads Boston by a game. Omaha leads Denver by, looks like 5.5 games. Jesus. Atlanta leads Birmingham by 1 in the National South. And Phoenix has the tiebreaker between Los Angeles and Portland in the National West. In the Century East, Baltimore has a half-game lead over Pittsburgh. Century Central, Chicago has a 3-game lead over Minneapolis. Dallas has a half-game lead over New Orleans in the Century South. And San Diego has a 1-game lead over San Francisco in the Century West. Now let's go take a look at the playoff standings. So here's the playoff standings in the National Conference. If the season ended today, it would be Omaha with the number 1 seed, Phoenix with the 2nd seed, Washington with the 3rd seed, Atlanta with the 4th, Los Angeles with the 5th, and Portland with the 6th. And everyone else is still eligible for the playoffs. Now, as I said last week, there is a playoff clinching scenario for the first time ever. Omaha. If they beat Milwaukee, if they beat Tampa, or Milwaukee loses to Birmingham, they clinch not only a playoff spot, but the National Central too. And there are a couple of playoff elimination scenarios too. Jacksonville will be eliminated if they lose and Atlanta wins. Oakland will be eliminated if they lose and everyone else in the National South, the National West, Phoenix, Portland, and Los Angeles wins. But other than that, that's it for the National Conference. So now we go into the Century Conference, where it's Chicago with the lead number 1 spot, San Diego with the 2nd spot, Baltimore with the 3rd, Dallas with 4th, Pittsburgh with 5th, and San Francisco with 6th. And we still have a massive close tie with that last spot between New Orleans, Minneapolis, and San Francisco. So these last couple weeks are going to be very interesting. There is no playoff clinching scenarios this week, but there are eliminations though. Columbus is eliminated if they lose. Orlando is eliminated if they lose to New Orleans. But that's it in the Century Conference. Now we go to the week's schedule. And for week 15, we would have Oakland going to Atlanta, Columbus going to Baltimore, Milwaukee going to Birmingham, San Francisco going to Buffalo, Kansas City going to Chicago, Seattle going to Cincinnati, Washington going to Cleveland. The big showdown, and for the probably the 2nd seed in the Century Conference, San Diego going to Dallas, Minneapolis going to Detroit, Portland going to Jacksonville, Oklahoma going to Manhattan, Orlando going to New Orleans, Tampa going to Omaha, and then El Paso going to San Antonio. For the 4 p.m. games, it's Houston going to Las Vegas, Boston going to Philadelphia, Miami going to Phoenix, and the Sunday nighter, Denver going to Indianapolis, and the Monday nighter, Los Angeles going to Honolulu, my bad. So now let's get Week 15 underway. We start Week 15 off with a rematch from a couple weeks ago. Oakland going to Atlanta. Oakland on a 2-game win streak. Atlanta losing 2 in a row now, need to keep up against Birmingham. And Oakland would pull off the upset by a 1-point game, and they would continue their 3-game win streak, along with beating another team with a win record. Atlanta now falls to 3 in a row. Oakland's quarterback, Bill Berry, did not have a good game, and he was injured, out for the next 4 or 6 weeks. Might even be season-ended, but Atlanta's quarterback, Cody Perry, with 18 of 38, 297 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. A rare 0 sacks game, and Oakland had 12 passes defended. No wonder they were able to pull off that victory. After that, we go up to Baltimore and M&T Bank Stadium for the Columbus Barons going to the Baltimore Charm, a rematch from Week 2 on Sunday night. And Baltimore would dominate 30-7 to officially knock Columbus out of the playoffs. Baltimore's quarterback Andrew Lassiter was 22 of 33, 291 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. And Baltimore's wide receiver Ariel Leary has 4 receptions, 118 yards, and 1 touchdown. Leads the league in receiving yards. It's incredible. Columbus had 3 sacks though. And Columbus's linebacker John Jewell had 12 tackles, a pass defended, and an interception. Then we head down to Legion Field, where the 6-6 Milwaukee Lakers meet the Birmingham Hornets, who gave them their first loss of the year, remember. And if Omaha was really watching this game, because if Milwaukee loses, Omaha would clinch the National Central. And that's exactly what would happen as Birmingham crushed Milwaukee 38-13, including leading 24-0 at one point. And with the victory, Omaha would officially clinch the National Central, and Milwaukee is now under 500 for the first time ever, and they have lost 6 in a row now. 7 sacks though in this game, 5 of them from Milwaukee, so their defense did a pretty good job. Milwaukee's linebacker Richard Hearn had 15 tackles and a pass defended, but Birmingham's linebacker Christopher Lee had 12 tackles, and their other linebacker Eugene Christensen had 4 tackles, a sack, 2 interceptions, and 1 pick six. What an incredible day they had. But congratulations to the Omaha Thunder for being the first team ever to not only clinch a playoff spot but clinch their division. They are the 2016 National Central Champion, but they still got a lot to go still. They still got that undefeated record going, and they still got to clinch first round bye and home field advantage for the playoffs. And we'll see them later today playing Tampa. Then we go to Buffalo, where the San Francisco Union was being hosted by the Buffalo Sabres. Both teams need to win to keep up in their respective divisions in the Century Conference. And San Francisco Union would win in overtime 44-38 in the highest scoring game in PFA history, which is now 82 points. However, San Francisco paid a heavy price as their quarterback John Getz was injured for the next 2 to 4 weeks. That might be very costly to win the division against San Diego. But Buffalo's quarterback Ricky Bale was 21-34, 270 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. And San Francisco had both a 100-yard receiver and a runner today. And San Francisco's backup quarterback Ruben Williams, who did not have any play at all before, played throughout the entire fourth quarter in overtime, and he was 11 of 15 for 132 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So he managed to pull off the victory for San Francisco. Then we head down to Chicago for Kansas City Hammerheads are visiting the Chicago 71ers, a divisional matchup. Chicago beat them earlier this year, and Kansas City's trying to win to keep up with the playoff spot in the Century Conference. Chicago would win though in a defensive shootout 22-9 to end Kansas City's 5-game win streak. Although there wasn't really much highlights, as Chicago's wide receiver David Tapia had 5 receptions for 105 yards but no touchdowns. There was 5 sacks in total, and Chicago's linebacker Paul Looney had 11 tackles, so good day for him. Then we go out to Cincinnati, where the Cincinnati Colts host the Seattle Quakes. Seattle won 2 in a row, trying to keep up and get over 500 to stay alive in the Century Conference playoffs. And Cincinnati would crush Seattle 27-10. Seattle led 10-7 all into the fourth quarter, where Cincinnati then scored 20 unanswered points. Cincinnati's quarterback Walter Morgan was 26 of 41 for 324 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. And Cincinnati had 2 wide receivers get over 100 yards, 7 sacks in the game, and Seattle's linebacker Melvin Jones had 14 tackles. Then we go out to Cleveland for another divisional matchup in the National East, as it's the Washington Americans visiting the Cleveland Bulldogs. Washington needs a win to keep up in the National East against Boston, and Cleveland is trying to win to recover from this terrible start. And Washington would win 30-7 to clinch their first ever winning season, as Cleveland has now lost 3 in a row. Man, after starting 3-0, they've gone 3-8 since. Oh boy, and look how terrible Hernandez was. 21 of 40, 216 yards, no touchdowns and 2 picks, and 7 sacks in this game. What a terrible season it's been for Cleveland, since they were the best team in the league going into the year. Now we go down to the Cotton Bowl for a very important Century Conference game. The San Diego Rays visit the Dallas Stars, a game between 2 teams that are fighting for the second spot in the Century Conference along with Baltimore. Dallas beat them a few weeks ago in San Diego during the battle of the backup quarterbacks, so let's see how they do this year with both their QBs starting. In an upset, San Diego would win 28-20. Man, they took the lead on a fumble return recovered for a touchdown. San Diego got their first ever win season, and Dallas has now lost 5 in a row. And San Diego's quarterback Bobby Valentine was 20 of 28, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns and no pick. And San Diego's running back Ronald Jolly, who is still backup, had 15 attempts, 100 yards and a touchdown. 2 straight 100-yard games as the backup. And Dallas's linebacker Victor Shores had 11 tackles. Then it's out to Ford Field, where the Detroit Engines host the Minneapolis Kitsune. Detroit got crushed a couple weeks ago at Minneapolis on Monday night. Let's see how they do here to try to break their 5-game losing streak. And Minneapolis would win in overtime 10-7. They both scored a touchdown in the first quarter and no score at the end until overtime. Unbelievable. Detroit's now on a 6-game losing streak. Detroit's wide receiver Jonathan Kasky had 5 receptions for 102 yards and a touchdown. And both teams missed a game-winning field goal in regulation, including Minneapolis, who missed 2. Minneapolis' running linebacker Francis Negrete had 10 tackles, and Detroit had 3 linebackers with 10-plus tackles. What an incredible day Detroit had on defense, but just was not enough to beat Minneapolis. Then it's out to Jacksonville with a rematch from 2 weeks ago. The Portland Dragons, hosted by the Jacksonville Bucks. Jacksonville got a quick lead, and it would end up winning 41-33 to ensure another week without a losing record. 34-3 at one point. Portland's quarterback Frederick Van Dyke was 22 of 36, 393 yards, 3 touchdowns in the pick, but Jacksonville's quarterback Michael Witters was 19 of 33, 325 yards, 3 touchdowns in the pick, 4 wide receivers with 100 yards, 3 of them with 110. Portland's free safety Edwin Hayat had 10 tackles. Jacksonville's free safety David Stock had 11 tackles and an interception. But man, Portland, after starting off 7-0, has now gone 2-4 since. Then we go up to MetLife Stadium as the Oklahoma Oilers are being hosted by the Manhattan Greens. And Oklahoma would win 31-29 in an incredible offensive shootout, and Manhattan would get their first ever losing season. Jamie Norwood was 14 of 25 for 346 yards, 2 touchdowns in the pick. Running back Edward Borders had 26 attempts, 120 yards, and no touchdowns. But both Manhattan's leading starting receivers had over 130 yards, including one of 150. But that still wasn't enough. And how about that? Oklahoma, after starting 2-6, is now going 5-1 since. Now we go down to New Orleans as the Orlando Astros are being hosted by the New Orleans Jazz. With New Orleans win, they could take the lead in the Century South, and Orlando would be eliminated. And that's exactly what would happen in a hard-fought game, as New Orleans would win 31-28. Orlando would get their first ever losing season and be eliminated from the playoffs. New Orleans quarterback James Williams was 21 of 30 for 326 yards, 1 touchdown and interception. 4 receivers had over 100 yards, 3 over 120, and 2 of them with 130. Not bad. Orlando's linebacker James Lyons had 14 tackles and 6 sacks total in this game. A disappointing season for Orlando, it's still be coming. Now we're out in Omaha as the Omaha Thunder hosts the winless Tampa Tropics, a match up a couple weeks ago. Now, although they clinched it, they still didn't know yet because the games happened at the same time, so let's see what happened. Omaha would clobber Tampa 42-10 to not only continue their win streak, but just found out during the game that the fans would find out that they would clinch a playoff spot. Omaha's quarterback Archie Marvin was 13 of 25, 232 yards, 4 touchdowns and an interception. Tampa's Eddie Robinson, though, was 23 of attempts, 141 yards and 0 touchdowns. But Omaha's wide receiver Stephen Carmoa had 3 receptions, 110 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So all 3 of his receptions were for touchdowns. That's incredible. 6 sacks this game, and Omaha's linebacker Philip Baer had 13 tackles. Now we go to a game that we thought before the season was going to start was going to be a matchup, a very important game here, possibly a PFA Bowl championship preview. But unfortunately would not be the case, but it's San Antonio Mustangs being hosted by the San Antonio Longhorns. It would be a defensive holdout, but San Antonio would win 17-10 to get over 500 for the first time since Week 7. There was not really any highlights, though, other than El Paso's run back Allen Davis getting the 20 attempts, 103 yards, and no touchdowns. He used to lead the league, but struggling since. Now it's out to Las Vegas as the Houston Twisters are being hosted by the Las Vegas Gamblers. And take a look at this! Las Vegas would win 51-0 in the biggest blowout victory in PFA history by over 16 points, the previous record that Phoenix had over Portland a few weeks ago. Now, although they got crushed, Houston didn't even do any turnovers in the game. It was just they couldn't get any yards at all. Meanwhile, Las Vegas could. What an incredible game Las Vegas had, as they're back over 500 for the first time in a long time. After that incredible game, it's out to Philadelphia as the Boston Destroyers visit the Philadelphia Hawks. And Philadelphia would win 2 in a row now, 33-18. After Boston took a field goal to start the game, Philadelphia would score 30 unanswered points to lead 30-3 at one point. Philadelphia's quarterback Leroy Black was 19 of 30, 338 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Gary Hughes had 3 receptions, 158 yards, and a touchdown, including getting a 69-yard reception too. Rick Lopez had 11 tackles, 1 forced fumble, And Boston's linebacker Ronald Billings, who was the second overall pick, had 10 tackles and 1 forced fumble. What a disappointing loss that was for Boston. We then go out to the desert as the Phoenix Storm, trying to recover from that 2 losing streak, host the Miami Sharks, who have now won 5 in a row to look to get over 500 for the first time ever. And Phoenix blew it again as Miami would win 20-10. Miami has now won 6 in a row, and they are over 500 for the first time ever. And Phoenix has now lost 3 in a row, and they've only scored 20 points in the last 3 games. That's just terrible. That offense needs some work done. But Miami's quarterback Anthony McCormick was 22 of 30, 223 yards, a touchdown, interception. Phoenix's running back David Sexton was 23 attempts, 118 yards, and a touchdown. And Miami's linebacker Anthony Lewis had 12 tackles and a sack. Then we get to Sunday night, who nobody thinks this game would have any meaning whatsoever, as the 2-10 terrible Indianapolis Express host the hot and surging Denver Myers. But can they keep up and actually keep up winning 2 in a row and stay above 500 by 2 games? And the answer is no! Indianapolis would come down, being down 23-7 to win 24-23. Denver blew a 16-point lead, and Indianapolis got their first winning streak. Zachary Ellis was 18 of 23, 201 yards, but no touchdowns or interceptions. First time he's had no touchdowns in a couple weeks. But Indianapolis' quarterback Rodney Sanders was 18 of 28, 256 yards, 1 touchdown, interception. Running back Kevin Smith had 25 attempts, 116 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Indianapolis' wide receiver Kenny Ivory had the game-winning touchdown with a 2:39 left on the clock. And Indianapolis' linebacker Frank Carr had 13 tackles, a sack, and a forced fumble. And Denver continues to blow their chance to get a playoff spot in the National Conference. So the final game of the week, Monday night, Los Angeles Angels bringing in their 8-game win streak against the Honolulu Phantoms, who they beat hosting them in Los Angeles many weeks ago by 1 point. So let's see how they do tonight with Los Angeles having a shot to take the lead of the National West since Phoenix and Portland lost. But Los Angeles would blow it as Honolulu would win 30-13. Los Angeles got up 10, but would end up blowing in the end. Their 8-game win streak has been snapped. Honolulu's quarterback Richard Clough was 17 of 21, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Los Angeles running back John Fox was 32 attempts, 149 yards. They probably should make him run even more since their passing offense isn't that really good. Honolulu's wide receiver Eric Fay was 6 for 7, 121 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Los Angeles' running back Herman Mons had 10 tackles, but Hawaii's linebacker Wilson Sharp had 13 tackles. That was a big opportunity Los Angeles blew there in that game. Well, after this incredible week, here's the standings after Week 15, as Washington still maintains their lead, now gained a bit over Boston by now. It looks like 1.5 games in the National East. And as stated, Omaha has clinched the National Central, but they still got a while to go still before they can clinch first round bye and home field advantage. Atlanta's lead, which they had a 5-game lead before over Birmingham. It's now been dropped to nothing as they are tied right now with Birmingham, but they got the tiebreaker at the moment. And Phoenix still has the tiebreaker over Los Angeles and Portland in the National West. In the Century East, Baltimore has a 2-game lead now over Pittsburgh. Chicago still has a 3-game lead over Minneapolis in the Century Central. Dallas has probably a quarter of a game lead over Dallas in the Century South. And San Diego has a 1-game lead over San Francisco in the Century West still. Now here's the playoff stands in the National Conference. Omaha still has the number 1 spot, but now Washington has moved to the 2nd spot. How about that? It would be Phoenix hosting Portland and Atlanta hosting Los Angeles. But now, here's the playoff clinching scenarios. Believe it or not, Omaha can clinch a first-round bye if they win. Doesn't matter what happened with Washington, though. Los Angeles loses, and this is a very, very difficult one, but Phoenix and Portland would have to tie. If that all happens, Omaha would clinch first-round bye. Jacksonville would be eliminated if they lose, and either Birmingham or Atlanta would win. So now we go to the Century Conference, with Chicago still leads number 1 spot, with San Diego still having the 2nd spot. San Francisco would be going to Baltimore, and Pittsburgh would now be going to New Orleans since Dallas has lost 3 in a row. They've been knocked out of the playoff picture at the moment. How about that? No team can clinch a playoff spot, but El Paso will be eliminated if they lose. Houston will be eliminated if they lose. New Orleans and Dallas wins. and San Francisco and Pittsburgh win. Detroit will be eliminated if that happens too for them. But that's it for the playoff standings. Now we look at the schedule for Week 16. First it'll be Tampa going to Atlanta, New Orleans going to Cincinnati, a rematch from a couple weeks ago. Kansas City going to Detroit, a division matchup. Another divisional matchup, Jacksonville going to Birmingham going to Jacksonville. Oakland going to Louisville, a rematch from a bunch of weeks ago. Houston going to Miami, another divisional matchup. Whole bunch of divisional matchups this week. How about that? Indianapolis going to Milwaukee, a big showdown. Boston going to Omaha. Philadelphia going to Orlando. Los Angeles going to San Antonio. That might be sick. Then we get to 4 p.m., which is Pittsburgh going to Columbus. San Diego going to El Paso. Seattle going to Honolulu. Denver going to Las Vegas. That's going to be important. A very important wild card possibly showdown now for the Century Conference. Dallas going to Minneapolis. A big showdown in the Century West between Phoenix and Portland. And then Buffalo going to San Francisco. And then the Sunday Nighter, a game that we thought was going to be a PFA Bowl matchup, but looks like not anymore. It'll be Chicago going to Cleveland. And then the Monday night, Manhattan at Washington. So that's it for Week 15, and I can't wait for Week 16. So tune in. So enjoy. Johnny!